My first night at Bella's Pizza wasn't supposed to be anything out of the ordinary. Honestly, I was just looking for some extra cash to get myself through college. A simple gig, right? It didn't seem like it'd be a big deal, just delivering pizzas. But this wasn't what I had imagined. The night started off like any other standard orders, nothing special. The usual 4 large pizzas and 2 bottles of soda, the kind of order I'd seen 100 times before. But then the address came through, and the moment I saw it, something felt off. It wasn't like any of the usual deliveries. This one was far out, like really far. I mean 20 minutes of driving through what felt like a never-ending stretch of nothing. My stomach tightened the longer we drove. It was dark by then, and the further we went, the less the streetlights made sense. The houses were spaced out, barely visible in the shadows, like forgotten remnants of a town no one cared about anymore. It felt like a ghost town, and I tried to brush it off as just the nerves of a first night on the job. But deep down, something gnawed at me. I glanced at Mike, my manager, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, casually looking at his phone. Then I looked at Tom, the other new guy, who was nervously fiddling with his seatbelt, clearly as uncomfortable as I felt. But neither of them seemed to notice how weird everything was. They were too busy focusing on the job, on getting the pizza there, on the routine. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just nerves. It was my first night. But the isolation of the place, the sheer emptiness of it all, it didn't sit right with me. Something about it felt like we were driving straight into a trap. I just couldn't shake that feeling. We pulled up to the house, and the second I laid eyes on it, I couldn't look away. It was like something straight out of one of those old horror movies. You know, the ones where the main character walks up to a house that's just begging to be abandoned? This place was exactly like that. A 2-story monstrosity. But every inch of it looked worn down, like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in decades. Some of the windows were boarded up, and the rest had that dirty, cracked glass that made you wonder if they'd ever been cleaned. It looked like no one should have been living there, let alone ordering pizza. But Mike, my manager, acted like it was no big deal. I wanted to brush it off. I really did. But there was something unsettling about it, like an itch that I couldn't scratch. Tom, the other trainee, was already on edge. He kept glancing up at one of the top-floor windows, and it wasn't just a casual glance. It was like he was sure someone was up there watching us. I tried not to show it, but it made my stomach flip. I didn't want to seem paranoid, so I just kept walking, trying to focus on the job at hand. But as we approached the front door, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had this feeling, this nagging thought that wouldn't go away. I shouldn't be here. The air felt heavier as we got closer, and my footsteps felt louder than they should have been, echoing in the dead silence of the yard. Mike kept talking about the delivery, like it was just another stop, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It didn't make sense. The address matched the order, but nothing else did. Nothing about this house, this place, felt right. And I had a sinking feeling that once we knocked on that door, things were only going to get worse. The door cracked open, and I swear something didn't sit right with me from the second I saw him. The man who answered was older, his face weathered and lined, but that wasn't what bothered me. It was the way he moved. Stiff, almost mechanical. He didn't open the door all the way, just enough to let us see a sliver of his face. It felt rehearsed, like he knew exactly how much to show and when. Maybe it was my nerves getting to me. But he didn't seem rushed or panicked, just strangely calm, like the door being opened a few inches was part of some silent agreement we hadn't made. He invited us in, and we stepped inside, but it was like stepping into a completely different world. The house was colder than I expected, the kind of cold that creeps into your bones. But it wasn't just the temperature, it was the emptiness. There was nothing, no furniture, no pictures, no sign that anyone actually lived here, just a few blankets scattered haphazardly across the floor. It looked like the house had been abandoned for years, but the man was clearly living here. The odd thing was, it felt like the house itself didn't want us there, like we were intruding on something. The silence was oppressive, and I could practically feel the weight of it pressing in on me. I glanced at Mike and Tom, expecting to see the same discomfort I felt, but they seemed unaffected. Mike was already looking around, like this was just another delivery. Tom seemed more uneasy. but he wasn't saying anything. I couldn't shake the feeling that this house wasn't supposed to be opened, that we weren't supposed to be here. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, like we were trespassing on a secret that shouldn't have been disturbed. But we were already inside, and I couldn't figure out how to leave. Something told me the next step would only make things worse. We stood there in the silence, waiting for the man to return with the money. But then I heard it. At first it was so faint I thought I might have imagined it. Just a soft scraping sound, like nails on a chalkboard. But as the seconds ticked by, it grew louder, sharper, more deliberate. A scratching, like something was clawing its way inside the walls, trying to get out. It sent a chill crawling up my spine. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the bare walls and the empty space around me. But the noise kept growing, louder with each passing moment. I glanced at Tom, and his wide eyes told me he'd heard it too. He asked me, almost in a whisper, if I heard it as well. I didn't have to answer. The look on my face gave it away. The sound wasn't coming from outside, not from the wind or the trees or the crumbling foundation of the house. It was coming from within the walls, from somewhere deep in the house, as if something or someone was trapped in there. I told myself it was probably rats. That's what Mike suggested, his voice steady as if nothing was wrong, but I knew it wasn't rats. This didn't sound like any animal. It was too rhythmic, too intentional. It was like something or someone was actively trying to get our attention, maybe even trying to escape. I wanted to leave. My feet itched to move, to get out of that cold, empty house, but something held me there. Maybe it was curiosity. I'd never felt like this before. It was like my body was frozen, even though my brain screamed at me to run. The scratching noise intensified, like it was getting closer. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was making that noise wasn't just trying to escape the walls, it was waiting for us to make the next move. But I couldn't bring myself to leave. Not yet. Something was pulling me deeper into the house, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I don't know why I started looking around the room, but something made me do it. Maybe I was just trying to distract myself from the growing unease I felt in the air. My eyes landed on a small, cluttered table in the corner. There were papers scattered across it. Old receipts, crumpled scraps of paper, and a few faded photographs. I didn't mean to, but I found myself walking over, drawn to them like I was being pulled by some invisible thread. I picked up one of the receipts. It was from a business I didn't recognize. The name was barely legible, smudged like it had been written in a hurry. Then I picked up a photo. It was one of those old family photos, a group of people smiling in front of what looked like a house. They seemed normal enough, but there was something off. It was hard to explain. Maybe it was their eyes. Maybe it was the weirdly formal way they were posed, like they didn't belong in the picture. I flipped over the photo expecting a date or a name, but instead I found something much stranger. A note scribbled in faded ink. "It's time." My heart skipped a beat. I turned the next photo over and there was another note. "He's coming." I felt a chill go through me. And then the last one, "Don't go back." The handwriting was messy, like someone had written it in a panic, as if they couldn't stop themselves from writing whatever was racing through their mind. The words made no sense, but they felt important. My fingers trembled as I quickly put the photos down and I glanced up, my heart pounding, just as the man came back into the room with the money. I tried to shake off the feeling, to act normal, but I couldn't. The moment had passed, but the weight of what I'd just read, of those strange, cryptic messages, stuck with me. I couldn't make sense of it, but I knew something wasn't right. Something was hidden in that house. Something I wasn't supposed to know. Mike, Tom, and I stood by the front door, waiting for the man to come back with the money. It should have been a simple task. Deliver the pizzas, get the payment, leave. But something about that house, that place, had started to feel wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling. The house was eerily silent except for the sound of the wind outside, or at least, that's what I thought it was. But then, I started hearing it. Footsteps. Slow at first, almost like they were hesitant, dragging against the wooden floor. I froze. The footsteps were coming from upstairs. They weren't normal, though. They didn't sound like someone just walking around. No, it sounded like someone was moving quickly, but trying to be careful, like they didn't want to be heard, but couldn't help but make noise. My heart started to race and I turned to Mike, but he didn't seem to hear it. He was looking at his phone, distracted, completely oblivious. I glanced over at Tom, hoping maybe he'd caught it too, and sure enough, his face had gone pale. He looked like he was about to say something, but then he stopped himself. Neither of us said a word. It felt too wrong to bring up. The footsteps grew louder and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It didn't sound like one person anymore. It sounded like there were multiple people upstairs, moving around in a hurried, frantic way. But there was no one else in the house. At least that's what I told myself. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. It wasn't a peaceful silence, either. It was the kind of stillness that makes your skin crawl. The kind that feels like the air around you is charged, like something unseen is watching you. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run out of that house and never look back. But I couldn't move. Neither could Tom. We were both paralyzed, staring at each other, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But there was nothing to explain it, nothing that made sense. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was overreacting, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I wanted to leave. I really did. Every instinct in me screamed to turn around, walk out, and never look back. But Mike told us to stay by the front door while he checked the back, so we stood there, shifting uncomfortably, trying to pretend like everything was normal. It wasn't. Not anymore. I kept glancing around the empty house, feeling more and more out of place. The silence was suffocating, like the walls were closing in. It was the kind of stillness that sets your nerves on edge, the kind that makes you think something terrible is about to happen. Then we heard it. Footsteps. But not above us this time, not the kind that echoed from the second floor. These were different. They were coming from below us, from the basement. My stomach dropped. The sound was slow, deliberate, like someone was walking just out of sight. It felt wrong, like the kind of footsteps you don't want to hear in a place like this. I looked at Tom, and he looked back at me, both of us wide-eyed and confused. Neither of us said anything, but we both knew something was happening. Something bad. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. And then Mike came running around the corner. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, his face pale and panicked. Without a word, he ordered us to get in the car. We didn't hesitate. We didn't ask questions. We just followed. As we drove away, Mike told us what he saw when he went around back. A group of men, at least 5 of them, sitting around a small campfire in the yard. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows, and in the center of the firelight was a dead deer. But it wasn't just any dead deer. This one was twisted, contorted in ways that didn't seem natural, like something had snapped its bones and bent them the wrong way. But the worst part? The men weren't sad. They weren't mourning the deer. They were laughing like they were watching some kind of sick joke unfold. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a run-down house or some weird delivery gone wrong. We had walked into something way worse. Something dark, something I couldn't understand, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to forget it. Honestly, I wasn't even supposed to be looking for more work. I was already doing double shifts at the care home, back-to-backs, that left me half awake and living off vending machine coffee. But bills don't care if you're tired, right? So when this overnight gig came up, I said yes before I even thought it through. Just one night. That's what I kept telling myself. One shift, one paycheck. The daughter's name was Dana. She sounded like she hadn't slept in weeks. There was this tired urgency in her voice, like she was holding it all together with thread. Said her mom, Eleanor, couldn't be left alone overnight anymore. She had dementia, some wandering issues, and Dana worked graveyard at the hospital. No family nearby, no help. I get it. I've seen that story before. I didn't ask too many questions, just gave her my rate, confirmed the time, and she seemed relieved. Too relieved, now that I think about it. I remember driving there thinking it would be a cakewalk, just me in a quiet house. Maybe Eleanor would sleep through the night. Maybe I'd even get to catch up on that show I'd been binging. I had my lunch packed, a hoodie and headphones just in case. That's the part that bugs me now. How casually I walked into it, how normal it all felt at first, like I wasn't about to step into something that wouldn't leave me for weeks. I should have known better. Jobs that sound too easy always come with something buried under the surface. And this one, yeah, this one still sits with me. When I first walked in, nothing screamed wrong. The house was spotless, like magazine ad clean, but there was this weird emptiness to it, not just quiet. Lots of places are quiet. This was more like still, like no one had actually lived in the space for a while, even though you could see all the signs that someone did. Family photos on the wall, a couple of half-used candles on the shelf, a coat draped neatly over a chair by the door, all the right objects, but no real warmth. It reminded me of those staged homes they use in real estate ads. Looks right, feels off. Dana didn't hang around long. She showed me the kitchen, pointed out the meds and spare water bottle on the counter, told me I could use the guest room upstairs if I needed to rest. Then she brought Eleanor upstairs, and that was that. No long briefing, no checklist, just a quiet, exhausted woman handing off a situation she clearly couldn't handle alone anymore. I parked myself in the living room, scrolling my phone with the TV on in the background. I figured, hey, maybe this really is just going to be a quiet shift. But then, maybe an hour in, I heard this sound from upstairs. Not footsteps exactly, more like slow, careful movements, like someone shifting their weight. I paused the TV and just listened. I remember calling up, asking if everything was okay. No answer. The sound stopped after that. Dead silence. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was just getting comfortable. I didn't go up to check, and I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to go looking for something. Maybe I wasn't ready to find it. By that point, I'd been there a couple of hours. It had gotten quiet again after that weird sound earlier, and I told myself everything was fine. I kept checking the time, waiting for that turning point where you start to feel like the night might actually go smooth. I remember finally getting up to grab the sandwich I'd packed, just something basic. Bread, turkey, no energy to be creative. I was heading back to the couch, plate in hand, not even really thinking about Eleanor anymore. I figured the melatonin Dana left out had done its thing and she was out cold. Then I saw her. She was just standing there, right where the hallway opened into the living room. No sound, no warning, just there. I didn't scream or anything, but my body definitely flinched, and I almost dropped the damn sandwich. She was looking at me like I'd just broken into her house, eyes wide, body tense, like she was ready to defend herself. That look froze me. It wasn't confusion, it was something more like fear, or maybe it was both. I couldn't tell, and for a second I actually felt like maybe I was the one who didn't belong. I kept reminding myself, she has dementia. This is part of it. This isn't personal, but knowing something and feeling it in the moment, those are two different things. I spoke gently, tried not to step too close, kept saying her name. After what felt like forever, I managed to walk her back upstairs. I gave her the melatonin Dana had left in the medicine cup and watched her drink the water. She didn't say anything, just got into bed and stared at the ceiling. I waited until her breathing settled, then went back down, telling myself that was the worst of it. I wanted that to be true so badly. I didn't mean to fall asleep. I really didn't. I told myself I wouldn't, but exhaustion just hit me. Dana had said I could use the spare room upstairs if I needed it, and honestly, by then, I was wiped. I made sure to leave the door open, just in case I heard something. Just in case Eleanor needed me. I told myself it'd be fine. She'd be fine. But when I woke up, I didn't know at first what was wrong. It wasn't the usual groggy kind of wake up where you stretch and yawn and try to remember what day it is. No, this one hit different. My heart was already pounding in my chest before I even realized why. There was something in the air. Something off. It felt like I'd been jolted awake, like my body knew before my mind did. I checked the clock. Still plenty of time before Dana was supposed to come back. But then I checked Eleanor's room. She wasn't there. I froze. For a second, I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe she was just in the bathroom, maybe just getting water. But no, I went quiet, moving around the house, trying not to make any noise, trying not to freak myself out. I didn't want to alarm her, didn't want to make things worse by startling her, or worse, making her feel trapped. It took longer than I care to admit, but I eventually found her. In the laundry room, standing perfectly still. The dryer was running, the hum of it loud against the silence. She was staring into the spinning light, like it was telling her something, like it meant something to her. She didn't say a word, not one, just stood there. I don't know how she got there so quietly, how she moved so silently through the house without me hearing a thing, but I didn't question it. I just led her back to her room, trying to keep my voice calm, trying to ignore the way my skin crawled. I didn't know it then, but that was just the beginning. It was probably about an hour later. I was still awake, but barely. It's strange how you can be exhausted but not quite able to fall asleep, like your body just refuses to shut down, even though it knows it's been running on empty for hours. Maybe it was for the best. I had this feeling, a weird gut feeling, that something wasn't right. It wasn't that I expected something to happen, but I knew something could. Then I heard it. A dull thud, not loud enough to be alarming at first, but persistent. It was rhythmic, like something opening and closing over and over again. It wasn't a random noise either. It was deliberate, like a pattern. At first I thought maybe it was the house settling. But no, that sound wasn't right for that. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was close. I couldn't ignore it. I stood up, trying to be as quiet as possible, and moved toward the kitchen. My heart had started racing again. The house was dark, quieter than before, but I could hear the sound more clearly now. It was coming from the cabinets. When I turned the corner into the kitchen, I saw her again, Eleanor. She was standing in front of one of the lower cabinets, just slamming it shut, over and over. Not fast, not frantic. It was methodical, like she was stuck in some kind of loop, repeating the same motion again and again without even realizing what she was doing. It wasn't like she was looking for something either. She wasn't even trying to get into the cabin. It was like she had a purpose in her mind, but I had no idea what it was. I stood there, watching for a moment, trying to figure out if I should intervene or just wait. I didn't want to startle her, but when I shifted my weight, when I made any kind of sound, she stopped, dead still. I could feel her turn her head toward me, and I wasn't sure what to do. It wasn't just the silence that felt heavy. It was the way she looked at me, almost like she wasn't sure what I was doing there either. Without saying a word, she just turned and walked away. She didn't seem shaken, or even aware of what had happened. She just went back upstairs like nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. That silence, it was more unsettling than the banging ever could have been. I still can't get it out of my head. I don't even know what time it was. Maybe 4 or 5 a.m.? The house was still quiet, still dark, but something was off. My brain was sluggish, like I was still half dreaming, but I could feel it. That feeling when you know you're not really alone anymore. Something was in the room with me, and it wasn't just the kind of waking up you do when you hear a creak or the wind. No, this was different. That's when I noticed it. The closet door, it was cracked open, not wide, just enough that I could see something moving. At first it didn't register. My tired eyes probably weren't focusing properly, but then I saw it, just a sliver of her face. Eleanor. She was standing there, barely visible in the darkness, but there was no mistaking her. It took a second for my brain to catch up to what I was seeing. I could feel my heart racing, but everything else felt like it was happening too slowly, like I was watching from behind a fog. She was moving toward me, just slowly, and mumbling things under her breath. Words I couldn't quite make out, but there was a cadence to it, like she was talking to herself, reassuring herself about something. But then there was the confusion in her eyes, like she didn't know what was going on, but at the same time like she somehow understood it all too well. I reached out for the lamp on the nightstand, trying to get some light into the room, trying to snap myself out of that paralyzed haze I was in. When the light finally flicked on, that's when I saw it, what she was holding. A kitchen knife. She was holding it casually, almost like it was a part of her, like it made sense in her world right then. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My stomach dropped. All I could think was, this isn't supposed to be happening. I didn't even know what to think anymore. It all happened so fast after that. I don't remember thinking. I just moved. I scrambled to get around her, to get out of the bed and away from her, like my body had just decided it wasn't going to wait around for me to process what was happening. She didn't chase me or scream or anything, but when I made my move, she swung that knife at me. It wasn't fast, it wasn't strong, but it was enough to make me realize that this wasn't just confusion anymore. She wasn't just lost in her mind. This wasn't about the job anymore. I wasn't a caregiver anymore. I was fighting for my own safety. And that's when everything I thought I understood about this job, about caring for people, about keeping them safe, it all changed. It wasn't just about me doing my job anymore. It was about survival. I didn't call 911. Even in that moment, with the adrenaline still coursing through my veins, I didn't make the call. Dana had told me to contact her first if anything went wrong, so I did. And even though I was in full panic mode, I still obeyed her. It's funny how things can just feel like automatic responses when you're in the middle of a crisis. I'd followed the rules so far. Why break them now? When Dana picked up, she didn't believe me. At first, she just sounded, well, exhausted. Maybe that's what she was, just tired, worried about her mom, trying to make sense of what I was telling her. You shouldn't have left her alone, she said, voice thick with disbelief. But the thing was, I hadn't exactly left her alone. Eleanor was there, holding that knife like she'd just wandered out of a nightmare. But Dana didn't see that. She didn't know the reality of what was happening. And then I heard the silence on the other end of the line. I'd told her what happened, but it didn't hit her until I mentioned the knife. She didn't have much else to say after that. I didn't have much to say either. What was there to say? I didn't feel like there was anything left to explain. It wasn't just a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was something else, something darker. I didn't tell her I'd fallen asleep. Didn't think it mattered. I couldn't bring myself to admit it anyway. How could I? I should have been awake, alert. The whole night was supposed to be a test of my skills. But what had happened wasn't about skill anymore, was it? So I stood outside, pacing in the cold, feeling the weight of everything settle in. I couldn't stop thinking about how close I'd come to something much worse. How easily it could have gone a different way. I didn't blame Eleanor. Not at all. How could I? She didn't choose this. She didn't choose dementia. She didn't choose the madness that came with it. But I couldn't help the weight of that night sitting on my chest, smothering me, as I replayed the moments again and again, trying to figure out what I had missed. What was the turning point? When did everything shift so suddenly? I thought I was prepared, but there's no way to be prepared for something like that. And in the end, I never went back. Not for her. Not for Dana. Not for anyone. I don't even know why I'm still thinking about it. Maybe I'll never get the answers. And maybe that's the worst part of it all. I keep wondering if there was something I could have done, or something I should have noticed before things got so strange. I don't think I'll ever stop wondering. I still don't know why I was sent to that place. It was supposed to be a routine first job, a simple fix, just a leaky pipe under the sink. It seemed like the kind of thing that wouldn't even require much thinking. But from the moment I pulled up to that house, my gut started to twist. It was miles from anywhere, nestled in a dead-end street that felt like it hadn't seen life in ages. The house itself looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Peeling paint, windows that hadn't been cleaned in years, and a yard that was more weeds than grass. You know the type of place I'm talking about. A place you'd avoid driving through after dark. And then there was Richard. His name was Richard, but I don't think I ever actually caught his last name. I didn't care to. I knocked, and he answered the door with this strange, unnerving grin that didn't match his eyes. I mean, it wasn't a friendly smile, more like a forced gesture, stretched wide across his face like he was trying too hard to seem normal. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about it made me uncomfortable. The way he looked at me, the soft, high-pitched tone of his voice. It felt off. Not in a way I could explain. I don't usually judge people based on looks, but this guy had an aura of weirdness about him. I told myself it was just nerves, that I was being paranoid. He let me in, and I did my best to shake off the feeling crawling up my spine. It was just a job, right? Just fix the pipe and get out. But even then, I couldn't ignore the nagging sense that I didn't belong there, that this whole situation was too strange, too wrong. But I pushed that feeling down. I had to. This was my first day on the job, and I needed to prove I could handle it. Stepping inside that house felt like crossing into a completely different world. It wasn't just the rundown state of the place. It was the absence of life, of warmth. The house was bare, cold, almost clinical. There wasn't a single piece of furniture in sight, nothing to make it feel like anyone actually lived there. No couch, no coffee table, no family photos on the walls. It was just empty space. I asked Richard if he had just moved in, and he gave this strange little laugh, like it was some kind of private joke. But I wasn't laughing. There was nothing funny about this. As I set my tools down on the cold kitchen counter, the silence in the house settled over me. It wasn't just a physical emptiness, it was a feeling, a heaviness that I couldn't explain. It made the air feel thick, like there was something missing, something crucial that hadn't been put in place yet. It wasn't a comforting emptiness, like an empty house ready for someone to move in. No, this felt more like a house waiting to swallow you whole. I tried to push all of that to the back of my mind as I crouched under the sink, focusing on the task at hand. But I couldn't ignore the sensation that Richard wasn't just standing off to the side, minding his business. No, it felt like he was right there, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Every now and then I'd glance up, and I swear his eyes were glued to me, not just in the way anyone might watch a person working, but with something more unsettling behind it. Like he was waiting for something. I asked him to step back, to give me some space. He didn't respond. It was almost like he hadn't heard me at all. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing too close, too aware of me, like I was the subject of some unspoken observation. I tried to focus on the job, but my instincts screamed at me to stay alert. Something wasn't right here. I wasn't sure what it was, but I couldn't ignore it. It didn't take long for me to realize something was off. I turned on the faucet, expecting a steady stream of water, but nothing came out. Not a single drop. I double-checked the knobs, thinking maybe I had missed something simple, but everything looked fine. I looked at Richard and asked him what was going on. His response was so casual, so offhand. It didn't quite add up. He said he must have turned off the main water valve earlier. But why would he do that? It didn't make sense. Curious, I asked where the valve was, expecting him to point to a standard spot, maybe under the sink or in the basement. But his answer sent a chill through me. He said it was upstairs. Upstairs. I tried not to show my confusion, but I couldn't help it. I've been in enough houses to know that water valves don't usually live upstairs. That's not where they're typically installed. Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. It was like he was acting like this was completely normal, like it wasn't strange at all. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to my nerves. It was my first job, after all. Maybe I was just overthinking it. But deep down I had this nagging feeling that I wasn't getting the full picture. I told him to go ahead and turn the water back on. He nodded, like it was no big deal, and casually turned away, heading toward the stairs. That's when something inside me clicked. The sudden silence in the house felt heavier, and I didn't trust the way he moved. There was no rush, no sense of urgency in him, just calm, deliberate steps. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all part of some kind of setup. I stayed still for a second longer than I should have, watching him disappear up the stairs, my instincts screaming that I needed to be careful, but I didn't know why. I tried to focus on the job. Really, I did. I needed to finish what I came here for, especially since this was my first real plumbing job. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept my head down, working under the sink, trying to ignore the rising unease in my stomach. And then I heard it. Footsteps. At first they were slow, like Richard moving around upstairs, maybe heading to the valve. But then they quickened. A fast-paced, almost frantic sound, like someone was rushing. I thought maybe Richard had slipped and was in a hurry to get back down, but then there was something else. More footsteps. More than one set. Different rhythms. Some quick, others slow, but all of them moving with purpose. I froze, my hand still gripping the wrench, the metal cold against my skin. My heartbeat was louder than the sound of those footsteps. Something wasn't right. I tried to tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but my gut wasn't buying it. The footsteps didn't make sense. Richard was alone, right? So why were there so many sounds? And why did they sound so coordinated? My body tensed up, a feeling crawling up my spine that I couldn't ignore. I looked toward the stairs, but I didn't see anything. No movement. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I tried to focus on the pipe again, my hands working mechanically as my mind raced. I told myself I needed to finish this job. I couldn't just bail on my first day, right? I needed the paycheck, the experience. But every fiber of my being was screaming at me to leave. I didn't even care about the damn pipe anymore. Something felt off. Something felt dangerous. But I stayed, telling myself that leaving without finishing would be worse. I shouldn't have stayed. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. I was a big guy used to rough situations. I didn't scare easily, but my gut wouldn't stop twisting, and my hands were trembling as I packed up my tools. Every sound, every creak from upstairs seemed to press down on me, heavier with every passing second. I wasn't paranoid, though. This wasn't just in my head. It felt real. Something about this house, about Richard. It all felt wrong. I tried to focus on the task at hand, but it was like my body was moving on autopilot. I couldn't help glancing behind me every few seconds, half expecting someone to be standing there watching me. That nagging sensation, the feeling that I wasn't alone, had wrapped itself around my chest, squeezing tighter. My heart was pounding, my breaths coming short and sharp. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I needed to leave because I was overthinking everything. But as I made my way toward the front door, every part of me screamed to get out, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I swung the door open and stepped outside into the cold air. For a brief moment, I stood there, just breathing. It was like I had been holding my breath since the moment I walked in. The air was sharp, biting at my skin, but it was a relief. I felt a strange calm wash over me, like I'd narrowly escaped something I couldn't quite name. I don't know what I thought would happen. Maybe I was just trying to rationalize the fear that was still gnawing at me. But something inside told me I wasn't being irrational. Something about that house wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been watched, and I wasn't sure I ever wanted to know why. I don't know what pushed me to call my boss right away. Maybe I thought I could laugh it off, chalk it up to an overactive imagination. I didn't want to sound crazy, but I couldn't just let it go. As soon as I drove away, the doubts began to gnaw at me. Was I just being paranoid, or had something truly messed up happened? I told Dave it was probably just some weird prank. Something set up by a prankster with too much time on their hands. It sounded like a reasonable explanation, right? But something in my gut didn't buy it. The whole situation felt too off, too unsettling to ignore. I wasn't going to drop it that easily. I had to know what happened, even if it made me look like a paranoid idiot. So, when I got back home, I immediately started digging. I pulled up the address from the call and ran a quick search. And then it hit me like a punch to the stomach. The house was abandoned. I didn't need a deep dive to realize it. The place had been vacant for years. There was no way Richard lived there. No way he had just moved in, like he claimed. My blood went cold as I pulled up the next piece of information. The number that had called me. It wasn't even real. It was a voice-over IP number, completely untraceable. I froze for a second, staring at the screen. This wasn't some stupid prank. This wasn't even just a weird coincidence. Whatever it was something worse. A shiver ran down my spine as I picked up the phone to call the police. I had to report what I'd found, just in case. But even as I dialed, I knew that whatever happened that day wasn't over. It hadn't even started yet. I still couldn't shake the feeling that I had barely scratched the surface. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the events of the day that haunted me. It was the call, the one I received earlier that day. At first, I'd brushed it off as some weird glitch, maybe just a wrong number or a poor connection. But now, with everything that had happened, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept replaying it in my head, the way the static filled the line before I heard that voice. It wasn't clear, barely even words, just a jumble of sounds that didn't make any sense. It was like someone was trying to tell me something, but they couldn't quite form the words. And then, the silence, absolute dead silence, right before the call ended. It didn't even sound like a disconnect. It was like the call just stopped. I remembered holding the phone, staring at the screen for a good few seconds after the line went dead. Maybe I thought I was imagining things, chalking it up to my mind being on edge. But now, sitting in the quiet of my apartment, I couldn't ignore how strange that call had been. It was more than just a glitch. There was something unsettling about the way it ended. That silence, it felt deliberate. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe this wasn't just some series of unfortunate events. Maybe this was all part of something bigger, like I was being drawn into something, being pulled into a situation I wasn't supposed to understand. And if I'm honest with myself, I wasn't ready to understand it. I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't want to find out. I kept asking myself, over and over, was someone watching me? Was someone behind all of this? I don't know what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back there, not for anything.